About the O line here. You hit on it with the throughout the season the nicks on the elbows and ankles and stuff like that. And we understand how physical this Alabama defense is. Is the O line with the youth they have, are they up to the challenge this week?
Well, is anybody up to the challenge against Alabama's front seven? I mean, they're about as good as you get. Maybe
Very true.
not only in the SEC, but maybe in all of football. I mean, they're just dominant at times. You look at their stats defensively, and it's hard to run. It's hard to get a first down against them, let alone have one of those 200-yard games as a team rushing the football. So everybody has trouble moving those guys. Most teams have a two deep, and when they send out when you're getting ready for a game. Well, Alabama's two deep has three. Everybody, so that means they can play 12 defensive linemen. They've got 7, 8, 9 linebackers are going to play, and they've got three deep in the secondary, and all those guys play. So their depth is incredible, and it's not. A lot of times you have a depth chart. Well, that guy's going to play backup middle linebacker, but I mean, at Alabama, the backup middle linebacker is right there with the starting guy. So that's what wins games for Alabama. They dominate in the fourth quarter because they wear you down and they beat you up. And that's where Tennessee's trying to get. Tennessee's trying to get to the point where they've got really great depth across the board. They're not quite there yet, but that's the biggest difference in this game. And anytime you play Alabama is that can you have anything left in the tank in the fourth quarter to make sure that you can hang with Alabama? And a lot of times that is the way you do it is force turnovers, hit them with some big plays, beat them in the kicking game. If you can do those three things, you got a chance to hang in there. If you can't, then they'll pulverize you if they can.
Bob, you talked about Alabama having depth defensively, and that's the kind of depth that they really haven't been able to showcase the last couple of years compared to the first several years that Saban has been in Tuscaloosa. So how important is it to get Josh Dobbs going through the air? Because this Alabama defense, for as good as they are stopping the run, still is pretty susceptible to giving up big plays through the air.
Well, they have done that, and I think Ole Miss is the one game in particular that people look at, and how was Ole Miss able to exploit them a little bit. I think in that game that what Ole Miss did was they got turnovers, and they kind of wore down the Alabama defense a little bit because their defense was out there in the field a lot. Alabama's time of possession, they hold the ball about 34 minutes with their running game. And so that means their defense isn't playing. They're only playing 25, 26 minutes a game. That's manageable right there. So I think anytime you can get a first down against Alabama is going to be important. I'm sure Alabama has looked at the blueprint that Oklahoma and Florida used, and that is keeping Josh Dobbs penned up, don't let him run, and have him throw the ball. So Tennessee's got to figure out a way that Josh Dobbs can be a dual threat. When Tennessee has won big games, Dobbs has hurt the other team with his legs and with his arm. And that's somehow Tennessee's got to work it that Dobbs is a factor throwing the ball and running the ball. And that's the challenge, I think, this week for Mike DeBoer and Butch Jones.
Bob Kesling on the line with us, Vols radio play-by-play man. You can hear him on the Vols Network every Saturday. Bob, Tennessee is allowing the fifth most rushing yards to opposing teams in the conference. Alabama is third in the SEC in rushing with, Derrick Henry, Kenyon Drake. Something's got to give here. Who do you think has the edge right there?
Well, I think Alabama's proven that they're able to run the football. So Tennessee, if you look at their overall, I haven't really checked it this week, but I know Tennessee's either 13th or 14th in the SEC in total defense. So when you stack that up and you stack up the fact that Shai Tuttle is out for Tennessee, and he was really a guy coming on at defensive tackle, and that Tennessee really only has, I think, 3 or 4 defensive tackles they feel really comfortable playing. That could be a long day for those guys if Alabama gets it rolling and they start steamrolling on these 10, 12, 15 play drives where they're just sending Derrick Henry at you all the time. So I think that's one of the keys to the game. Can the Tennessee front seven stand the pounding that they're going to take from Alabama? Because they're going to pound you, try and get you to bring those safeties up, and then they're going to try and send a lead right down the middle and throw it over your head. So, and as you know, Lane Kiffin has probably got 7 or 8 of his home run plays dialed up that he'll be ready to pull out of the bag and see if he can, get you on the long pass. So It's a formidable challenge for this Tennessee defense to slow down really one of the really good offenses in the SEC.
Absolutely. So you talk about the depth at defensive tackle, guys like Quay Piku, or maybe some other guys might get some playing time. Do you see a guy maybe like Charles Mosley going back over to the defensive side of the ball and maybe getting some reps at nose tackle or anything like that?
Well, they've talked about that, but the coaches have kind of said that they don't think they're going to do that. It's very hard for a guy that has been playing offensive line, all year to suddenly switch over for this game and play defense. Now, they might have a short yardage package for him. They might have one or two plays where in specific situations they'll send him in, but I don't think that's right now. I don't think that's a long-term solution to what the problem is. They got to get Kyle Phillips back healthy. That will give them an extra depth in there. And the guys they've got have just got to play. I mean, Owen Williams and Danny O'Brien, those guys they're going to play a lot of snaps Saturday, and I think they know that going into it.
Bob, you just kind of hit on it with Josh Dobbs, that the offense has to open it up. We know that the Tide have the third best rushing defense in the nation. Does this game lie on the shoulders of Josh Dobbs' arm rather than his legs?
Well, I think not necessarily, but I think it does lie with Josh Dobbs. I mean, he has to play well. I don't think there's anybody that will doubt that. But if you look at any great team or even a good team, they've got to get good quarterback play. You can't have the quarterback dropping the ball and throwing interceptions. I mean, I think the best example of that is there's nobody in the country that doubts Ohio State has the best roster from top to bottom. I mean, they've got depth. They got NFL players all over that roster. But they're struggling because they're not getting good quarterback play. Now, they've got two quarterbacks that had great years last year, but they're not hitting open receivers. They're missing third down throws. They're throwing the interceptions. They're doing all kinds of stuff. And although they're undefeated, their offense is kind of ground to a halt. And they're struggling offensively. Now, they're still winning, but they're still struggling. So that shows you, even if you got a great roster, if your quarterback play isn't very good, you're going to have a hard time winning. So that falls back to Josh Dobbs again. He has to play very, very well, I think, for this team to win. And I think he's got to make plays. I think he's got to run the ball. I think he's got to do all those things. He's got to hit open receivers. Alabama didn't give you many chances to make plays. And when you get a chance, you better hit them. And if you find an open receiver, you better get the ball to him. And that's what will be Josh's challenge on Saturday. But the other thing about that he has to get some help from his wide receivers. Those guys have not helped him out very much. Now, Josh Smith made a big play in the Georgia game, but you haven't seen many spectacular catches or guys that have gone up and taken balls away from defensive backs, or the guys that have stretched out and laid out and made a great play. Those have been few and far between. And against Alabama, you got to hit some of those. So that'll be a challenge, too, for Josh Dobbs to be more accurate and to make plays when they're available.
Bob, you have the pulse of Vol Nation better than I do. This Alabama game aside, looking more big picture, if this team wins out after the Alabama game and they end up going, let's just say, they win 8 games, how do you think the fan base would take that?
Well, I think there's I think the expectations kind of got blown out of proportion
right
in early season. I think everybody was buying into the recruiting, propaganda was coming out all over the country about how good these guys are. I mean, suddenly Khalil McKenzie is supposed to be better than Reggie White as the first time he steps on the field for Tennessee. Well, that's just, that's unrealistic. That's not going to happen. There's a growing period. Even, Reggie White wasn't Reggie White when he was a freshman. Neither was Albert Haynesworth or John Henderson. Those guys, it takes them a year or two to really get their strength up, figure out the pounding, be able to play in the fourth quarter in these games because it's a different speed. So everybody had kind of talked themselves into the fact that, hey, Tennessee's going to beat Oklahoma and Tennessee's going to go to Florida and win big. This is going to be great. We're going to win 10 games and all this kind of stuff. Well, the reality of it is there's still a golden rule in football that juniors and seniors beat freshmen and sophomores. That's been true for eons in football. And because they're bigger and stronger and faster, they got more experience. There's a lot of things going in their favor. So Butch Jones tried to pump the brakes a little bit, telling everybody, we got a shot, but we still, the odds are against us in some of these games. And I think now people are kind of taking a step back and saying, well, maybe he was right. That, we got talent, but we're still very young, and those young players, they're still a learning curve. So I think 8 wins would be really good for this football team. I don't think there's any question that if you'd ask Butch Jones right now if he'd go 8-4, he'd take it in a heartbeat. And so I think the fans are realistic. I think the eye test tells you that Tennessee's better than it was 3 years ago when Butch took over. I mean, they're bigger players, they're faster players, they're more talented players. They play better. They're disciplined. They don't jump off sides. There's a lot of mistakes. They don't turn the ball over very much. I mean, there's a lot of things to like about where the program is right now and where it's headed, but there's a growing process here, and I think the fans have to be realistic with the fact that it doesn't happen overnight. And look how long it took Nick Saban to really build that Alabama team into a juggernaut. I mean, that didn't happen overnight either at Alabama. It happens. It really happens any place that you just step in and suddenly start winning big. So I think the fans are getting more realistic, and I think the fans know that Tennessee is closer than it was, but not quite there yet.
Absolutely. Bob Kesling, Vol Radio Network. Bob, thanks so much for coming on and joining us. We really appreciated it.
Hey, anytime, guys. You guys have a good weekend. Go to class, okay?
Thanks, Bob.
Thanks,
We'll
Bob.
try to.
All right. Okay, guys. See you.
See ya.